She was a loving wife and mother. When her children were gunned down on the highway, she said a madman attacked the family, but police didn't buy it.
There were never any tears that night.
Now Diane Downs is behind bars, convicted of killing one child and seriously wounding 2 others. Police say her boyfriend hated children.
I mean, it's not a believable story. If I had done this, I could have come up with a believable story. It really happened.
Little Beth Usher, a living symbol of every parent's nightmare. At age 7, the victim of a deadly disease. The only cure, a dangerous operation that removed half her brain. But miracles happen, and a courageous brother has helped turn this tragic story around.
It was really painful for her. I just felt like just explode. I was so mad.
Hello, I'm David Frost. Welcome to the first edition of Inside Edition. We'll be back with the story of a mother's ultimate betrayal of her children after this. To her neighbours, she was a loving, divorced mother. But Diane Downs betrayed the love of her children in the coldest and most brutal way possible. She shot them, killing her youngest daughter and seriously wounding 2 of her other children. Now, why would any mother want to do that to her own children? Police say that in Diane's case, the reason was that her boyfriend, her new boyfriend, hated kids. Jeff Cole has the incredible story of a mother's ultimate betrayal of her children.
My whole life, even as a child, all I really thought about, I used to carry dolls around on a pillow, and I wanted to be a mom.
What Diane Downs wanted more than anything else was to have children. She got her wish, but her dream turned into a twisted tragedy when she was sentenced to life for shooting her children because her boyfriend didn't like kids. Even today, 5 years later, her former husband would like to see her pay the ultimate price.
Executed. That's what I was hoping for. That's what I still feel that they should have done that, you know. We'd all be better off.
But it was the children who would pay for what Diane wanted.
Diane's the type of woman who I think could cut your throat and then sit down and have lunch next to your body.
I wouldn't walk in there and say, this weird person came up out of nowhere and shot us for no reason and just left. I mean, that's not a believable story. If I had done this, I could have come up with a believable story. It really happened.
It was back in May of 1983, next to this creek, alongside this isolated country road outside of Springfield, Oregon, that this bizarre and tragic crime was committed. It was around 9:45 in the evening when Diane Downs said a man flagged down her car and demanded her keys. When she refused, he pulled out a pistol and shot her and her 3 small children.
I could smell the blood. I could smell the gunpowder. It was just a really, really horrible feeling.
But Diane says she somehow managed to escape and rushed to a nearby hospital. 7-year-old Cheryl was dead on arrival. 8-year-old Christy was shot twice in the chest. 3-year-old Danny was shot in the back and lay paralyzed. Diane, however, received only wounds to her forearm.
It was all wrong. From the beginning, it was wrong.
Detective Doug Welch was one of the first officers at the hospital that night, and although he didn't realize it at the time, this case would consume his life for many months to come.
Here was a woman who was completely apathetic about the welfare of her kids. She was just emotionally flat and preoccupied with something else.
That evening and the next day, police were out in full force, looking for any clues that would lead them to the man that Diane claimed did the shooting. later to be known as the bushy-haired stranger.
I'm throwing the keys, okay? I'm throwing the keys.
4 days later, as one child was being buried, the other two still in intensive care, Diane reenacted for police what happened that night. Besides wondering why a woman with children would stop her car and get out for a strange man, detectives couldn't help but notice Diane's seemingly carefree attitude.
I just hit my cast. Started the car and left. The car door shut itself. God dang. Sure, I could sit here and cry and be all upset. And what's it going to prove? It proves nothing. I am who I am, and I can't prove that I'm anybody other than what I am.
Diane was brought up in a strict religious family in Phoenix. She graduated from high school with straight A's. She married Steve Downs at 17, and almost immediately they had children.
I got pregnant when I wasn't allowed to, and I'm not saying he forbade me to get pregnant, but I didn't consult him. I wanted to have children, and so I got pregnant without asking permission.
Well, once she had the kids, you know, it was another story, you know. Well, she treated them like crap, you know. She really didn't treat them very good.
Christy and Cheryl came early in the marriage. Little Danny came later, the result of an affair. Diane then became a surrogate mother, bearing a child for another woman. After 8 years, the marriage ended in divorce.
This was a woman that really got around, you know. Of course, I really didn't know that. Hey. You know, you're not supposed to, you're the husband. You're supposed to be the last to know.
In 2 years' time, I had 10 separate lovers. 2 years. That's not very many, and less than half of them were married.
Diane worked as a letter carrier here at the Chandler Post Office just outside of Phoenix. This is where she would meet a fellow employee, a married man who she would have an intimate relationship with. According to Oregon police, that man would be the reason why she would later try to kill her children. Robert Knickerbocker told Diane he would divorce his wife of 10 years and marry her. But there was one problem. You see, he didn't have kids, and he didn't want kids.
Well, hey, I don't have a problem with you having a relationship with anybody, you know, especially if it's going to work into something serious. And how does he feel about the kids? Oh, well, he doesn't want anything to do with the kids. He hates kids. He can't have kids, and he had a vasectomy so that he can't have kids, on and on and on.
Diane and the children moved to Springfield, Oregon. She set up a new life in this apartment house and waited for her boyfriend to get a divorce and join her, but he never showed up. According to police, she became obsessed with trying to get him, writing him letters every day, but they would come back unopened.
He would change his mind on a daily basis. I'm coming, I'm going, I'm coming, I'm going. I want a divorce, I've changed my mind, I don't want a divorce. A week and a half later, he changes his mind, he doesn't want a divorce, okay?
This was a real obstacle as far as Diane was concerned. Those kids were a burden, and there was no way that she could see that she was going to get this guy up to Oregon as long as she had the kids.
Along with the letters, this statuette was found in Diane's apartment. Inscribed at the base, to Christy, Cheryl, and Daniel, I love you, Mom, dated just 6 days before the shooting. Police believe this was not a gift, but a memorial, because soon Diane would be without her children. The town of Springfield was shocked by the crime. Diane proclaimed herself the victim of an unknown madman. But as police investigated, they found no evidence to support her story about a bushy-haired stranger. Instead, everything pointed to Diane. Most damaging were the slugs found at the scene. Police say they were fired from a .22 Ruger pistol. Although the weapon was never found, Diane was known to have a similar gun.
We were able to learn that she did have a Ruger.
She had that gun, and she pulled that gun out and shot those kids with it.
Police were unable to crack Diane's story about a crazed killer who only demanded her car keys and said nothing more before shooting her children. But during a tape-recorded police interrogation, she slipped, changed the story, and said that the man had called her by name and threatened to kill her if she talked.
This individual talked to you, referred to you by name, and also referred to your tattoo.
Right.
As close as you can remember, what did he tell you?
If you say anything about what happened here, that they'd come back and kill me.
It wasn't an intentional lie, though. I didn't sit
But you
just
changed
sit
your
there.
story.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I agree. I mean, you know, you've heard it. It's obvious.
Doesn't that make it seem kind of tough to believe what you're saying? If you change your story 2 months after the shooting?
I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to believe me. I'm not saying that anybody has to believe me. But I know within myself, I can sit here with a clear conscience and know that I did not shoot my kids.
There was only circumstantial evidence to go on. Police felt they needed more. They had to talk to the 2 surviving children. Danny was too young, and Christy had suffered a stroke as a result of her gunshot wounds and had difficulty speaking.
Why wouldn't they arrest me if I did it? If they really had this evidence, I say they didn't have the evidence.
Finally, police arrested Diane, and incredibly, she was pregnant once again. Throughout the trial, the public would see Diane being led to the courthouse in a maternity gown and handcuffs. The trial was held here at the Lane County Courthouse in Eugene. And although the prosecution felt they had a strong case, they were still concerned about their only eyewitness. Would little Christy Downs, now 9 years old, be able to take the stand and testify against her mother? In an emotional and oftentimes tense account, Christy Downs told the jury what happened that night. When asked, "Who shot you?" she replied, "Mom did."
Her daughter Christy testified that Mom stopped the car, got out, and then walked to the trunk where she obtained something. We feel it was a murder weapon, and then walked back where she reached inside and shot the kids. After that, we think that Diane then shot herself.
A jury found Diane Downs guilty of murder and attempted murder and sentenced her to life in prison, where she would later have her baby and give it up for adoption. But after serving only 3 years in prison, she escaped by scaling over a barbed wire fence. Diane was now on the run and a threat once again, but she says she was looking for the bushy-haired stranger.
I wanted revenge at that time. I wanted to do some really obscene things to his body.
But instead, 11 days later, she was apprehended, hiding in a nearby house with a former cellmate's husband. Diane Downs is now held in a maximum security prison in New Jersey, where she's working on her latest appeal. Why are you here?
I don't know. I don't know.
Doesn't that kill you?
No.
Why?
I'm a survivor.
She's destroyed so many people, and I think without one shred of regret. I don't think there's any regret in her body. That I don't think she's ever come to grips, with what's happened. I mean, the gravity of what's happened. The kids especially. She destroyed them. 3 perfectly innocent young children. Destroyed them. Christy and Danny eventually recovered from their injuries. However, their father, Steve Downs, waived his parental rights. He claimed that his prior arrest record made it too difficult for him to get custody of the children. But ironically, the man who prosecuted Diane was so taken with her children that he decided to adopt them after the trial, and they live with him today. David?
Jeff, thank you very much indeed. When we come back, the inspiring story of a young boy's devotion, life-saving devotion, to his sister.
She was almost crying. It was just so scary then.
He's the best brother that I could have.
Stories of medical miracles are not necessarily that new, but this is a special story. It's a story of a young girl with a deadly disease. Her only cure was a life-threatening, experimental too, operation to remove half her brain. And as John Scott found out, it was the love and the care and the nurture of her older brother that willed and pulled little Beth through her ordeal.
she was on a seesaw with an older boy. And when she was up in the air, the older boy got off and she fell. That's when she had her first seizure, and I ran and brought her in and told the office. They called my mom, and my mom came and called an ambulance, then brought her to the hospital.
Brian Usher Jr. looks out for his sister. To him, Beth is special. To many, she is a walking miracle. 2 years ago, 9-year-old Beth Usher had half of her brain removed in surgery at Johns Hopkins Children's Center in Baltimore. Doctors operated to save her life and give Beth a chance to live normally. Today, Beth is a third grader in Storrs, Connecticut. But Brian Jr. remembers the 2.5 years of pain that his little sister went through. He was at her side as Beth fought for her life.
When she first got it, I didn't know what was going on. So I didn't really know. I thought it was just something she was going through, and then after a few weeks she'd be better. But after a month or so, I started to get real worried.
Beth Usher was a normal 5-year-old until the day she fell off the seesaw. Then the seizures started, one after another, up to 100 a day, seizures that were starting to kill her. It took over a year for doctors to find that it wasn't the fall that was causing Beth's problems. A rare disease called Rasmussen's encephalitis was attacking Beth's brain, causing it to shrink. Brian Jr. was with his sister as she was treated at hospital after hospital.
Sometimes I was even mad at the doctors. She had about 10 tests every day. It was really painful for her. So I just felt like I was gonna just explode. I was so mad.
There is no drug treatment for Rasmussen's encephalitis, but almost 2 years into the disease, Beth's family found hope at the Johns Hopkins Children's Center. They were offered 2 options. Watch the disease cause Beth to deteriorate. Untreated, she would die within 4 years. The second, radical brain surgery, a hemispherectomy, removed the diseased portion of Beth's brain, the entire left hemisphere.
The operation is not without risk. Children die. Of the 25 hemispherectomies that we've done, we've had 1 child who's died, 1 child who was left more impaired than she was at the time she went into operation. Most of our children have done very well, but these are operations which have major risk.
The Ushers made the hardest decision of their lives when they decided to let Beth take the risk of surgery on February 4th, 1987.
It was like 10 minutes before the operation, before they were gonna put her to sleep and start the operation. She called me, and she was almost crying. It was just so scary then.
Beth Usher was in surgery 12 hours. Hemispherectomies are performed almost exclusively on children because, if successful, a child's brain naturally transfers the information from the diseased lobe over to the healthy side. They have a chance of coming out of the operation with their faculties intact. But Beth did not come out of it. She went into a coma.
We were blaming ourselves. What did we do? You know, what did we do to this poor kid?
All the Ushers could do was wait. Days turned into weeks as Beth lay in a coma.
I would go into the chapel. There was a little chapel in the hospital, and I would pray for her.
Then Brian Jr. would go upstairs to his sister's room.
And crawl right into bed with her and hug her and talk to her and rub her back and, you know, just try to comfort her because it was the only thing that he knew how.
And she was in a coma for about a month, and when she finally woke up, my mom and dad, I was at my aunt's house, and my mom and dad called me in the morning and told me, and I was so excited I was jumping around.
Slowly, Brian's little sister came back to life.
I can remember is that he would tell me that everything would be all right, and he told me that I would get out of the hospital soon.
Like a dream come true, Beth Usher came home in the spring of '87. She was back in school before it let out for the summer. Today, Beth has slight paralysis on her right side. She takes one special education class in reading. But other than that, she's a regular third grader. Her brother Brian is still looking out for her, though. He says he always will.
Yes, I do. I really love her. She does a lot for me and helps me.
He's fun to be with because he makes me feel better. He reads me books and plays with me. Helps me clean my room. He's the best brother that I could have.
Well done, Brian. Beth's parents say their greatest relief is to have their daughter back, healthy and well. But their greatest pride, my God, what pride it must be, in the love shared by their two children. We'll be back with more of Inside Edition after this. In the real life is stranger than fiction department, America woke up today to pictures of its president-elect with a gun in his hand. Of all the creatures that George Bush could go hunting for, he picked, yes, you've guessed it, quail. Again. And in the sport and soap opera department, the latest in the Mike Tyson and Robin Givens story, Robin herself told reporters today, quote, "It's not true that I married Mike for his money. I'm divorcing him for his money." That's all for today, but more tomorrow on Inside Edition, the story of a preacher who took the commandment, love thy neighbor, a little too seriously.
He spoke of fidelity and devotion from the pulpit, but in private there were shocking charges of worldly passions.
I guess every muscle in my body must have froze because he began to touch me.
One minister's religious career of seduction and sin in the very same church where he preached.
That's on our next Inside Edition. Thank you for joining us right now. Until then, goodbye for now.